So thank you very much for coming to this eighth training webinar for the Gardens Trust Green Futures project, which is supported by Historic England. I'm Tamsin McMillan. I'm the lead volunteer support officer at the Gardens Trust, and I'm running this project with Frankie Taylor, who's our engagement officer and who you've seen plenty of times. If you'd like to use subtitles, please just use the show captions button at the bottom of your screen. We're going to, as usual, take questions at the end of the presentation, but please type them into the chat as you think of them. And we're also going to have a quick poll at the end on how you found our training, both today and in general through this project. As usual, we're going to send you a link to the recording of this webinar and a PDF of all the slides, which will go onto our resource hub as well on our website. And the PDF is going to include any of the links that I refer to today if you want to follow up on any of them. And if you've missed any of our previous webinars, you can find the recording on our resource hub under Green Futures Project. So in earlier webinars, we've looked at how to research your site and record what remains today. And if you came to our last webinar, you'll have heard Historic England's Caroline Skinner describing the ways in which nationally important historic designed landscapes and other heritage assets can be recognised by designation, whether that's as a registered park and garden, a scheduled monument, or a listed building. This time, we're going to be looking at the benefits of placing research onto online heritage databases so that it can be used by others, including professional researchers and planners, to understand, conserve, and protect landscapes. So what we'll be covering today, we're going to look at how research from this project and from other projects is important in conservation, especially for non-designated designed landscapes, i.e. those that are considered to be of local rather than national importance. We'll look at the duty of developers to understand and consider the significances of non-designated parks and gardens. And we'll run through the best platforms to place research on: historic environment records, local lists, and the National Heritage List for England. So how is research, including that carried out by people like our Green Futures volunteers, important? And how does it contribute to the historic record? Well, I'll start by quickly recapping the aims of this project. We're trying to research at least 60 parks, gardens, and other kinds of historic designed landscape, which are in or near proposed NSIPs, nationally significant infrastructure projects, like roads, rail schemes, reservoirs, solar and wind farms in the east of England, like the one shown here, which is Highgrove Solar Farm in Suffolk. And the reason this project's research is so important is that it identifies the history and significances of these designed landscapes, which those working in the sector need to know about. And this knowledge helps to inform developers and planners' decisions about the detail of the large infrastructure projects. And statutory consultees like Historic England and the Gardens Trust will also be able to use the research to help the planners make their decisions. Of course, research from the project will remain on the historic record permanently, and so will be important in any future development decisions as well, not just for the current NSIPs. And it may also be used by future researchers. Currently, apologies, I think my slide's moving around. Currently, around 40 volunteers in the 6 eastern counties, Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, and Cambridgeshire, are just starting to record and research historic parks and gardens affected by NSIPs, like East West Rail, the Fens Reservoir, East Pye Solar Farm, and Nortil, the Norwich to Tilbury electricity transmission upgrade, shown here. On the left, you can see that it crosses 3 counties, and on the right, there's a closer look at a short section in Essex. Some counties with fewer proposed NSIPs will only have a few landscapes to research. Others have many more. For example, Essex and Norfolk are starting their research by examining 14 parks and gardens, only 3 of which, like Falkbourne Hall, shown here on the right, are already registered. In most cases, as for Falkbourne, the development will be in the setting of the landscape, rather than within its boundaries. Sorry, I think my slides keep moving around a little bit. Do bear with me. The Green Futures research will be finished by April and then placed onto online heritage platforms. Of course, there are lots of other ways to share your research, including on your County Gardens Trust or other organisations' website, creating Wikipedia entries, or even writing a book. Lots of County Gardens Trusts share their fantastic research in these ways, and we do encourage all of these. The more, the better. You can see here examples of research on Lancashire and Buckinghamshire Gardens Trust's own websites, and books by Norfolk and London Gardens Trusts. But for this project, the research will be added to Historic Environment Records, or HERs, to local lists, and to the National Heritage List for England, where it will be most accessible to developers, planners, and consultees. So we're aiming to enrich records for 10 to 30 existing sites on the National Heritage List with new information via the Missing Pieces project. We want to put 30 to 80 additional items of research onto the HERs, and we want to get 10 to 30 sites added to local lists of non-designated heritage assets. We hope that the volunteers will be able to take the lead on sharing their own research in this way, as this will be good practice for continuing to do so after Green Futures is finished. We will of course be able to support the volunteers to do this in liaison with each county's lead volunteer. Systems for uploading may vary from county to county, so this webinar is just to give you the outlines and explain why it's so important to share the research. So as I've said, Caroline Skinner covered registration in our last webinar, so I'm only going to look at this briefly today. There are over 1,700 sites on Historic England's Register of Parks and Gardens of Special Historic Interest in England, i.e. landscapes which are considered to be of national significance. Registration is a material consideration in the planning process and also triggers specific elements of national planning policy. The Gardens Trust is consulted about any planning applications affecting registered landscapes of any grade. However, it's really worth noting that registered landscapes make up only around 1/10 of the historic designed landscapes that we know about from historic environment records. And only a small number of historic parks and gardens are registered at the moment in the east, as shown on this map, the little green shapes. So there are 10 in Bedfordshire, 35 in Cambridgeshire, 32 in Suffolk, 40 in Essex, 45 in Hertfordshire, and 54 in Norfolk. It's fantastic that these landscapes are recognised and protected, but much larger numbers than this are non-designated landscapes, but still of a significant historic interest. And we hope that the project will identify some of these as potential national significance, and that these will be put forward to Historic England for potential inclusion in the register. The assessment of applications for registration can take 6 to 12 months, so it's unlikely to be completed before the end of the project, but we will of course keep you updated. So national designation is not, however, the only way in which significant landscapes can be recognised. As we know from our earlier sessions on setting and significance, the National Planning Policy Framework, or NPPF, says that both designated and non-designated heritage assets must be considered in policy and development decisions, which is great. And these two paragraphs explain that local planning authorities must assess how a heritage asset may be affected by a development proposal, and that this also applies to non-designated heritage assets. So that's really important. In order to gather information about the significance of designated and non-designated historic parks and gardens, according to the NPPF, planners must consult HERs. So Planning Policy, National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 205, states that the local planning authority should have access to an up-to-date historic environment record, which should be used to assess the significance of heritage assets and the contribution they make to their environment. So there must be an HER. And paragraph 207 says that developers should, at a minimum, consult the HER to understand the potential impact of their proposal on the significance and the setting of any nearby heritage assets. We introduced HERs in our webinar on significance, but as a reminder, these are county or district-based digital collections of information held in a database with an accompanying digital mapping system. They cover thousands of archaeological sites, fieldwork, and other elements of the historic environment. And they collect material from lots of different sources, including specialist research groups such as county gardens trusts. They have two main uses, so as material for academics, researchers, etc., but also to inform planning applications and support local authority officers in making planning decisions. Not all HERs are free to access, though nearly 2/3 of them are accessible online via the Heritage Gateway website. And as I've said, there'll be links to all of these sites in the PDF of the slides, which we'll send through later. So as well as the Heritage Gateway website, you can also access lots of HGRs via the local planning authority. And it's worth checking, always checking to see whether you can access via your planning authority, as sometimes there are more records included that way. You can also visit many HGR offices in person by appointment, and you can look at their collection of supporting materials and talk to the HGR officer. So that may be worth doing as well. If you'd like to find out more, you can have a look at Historic England's publication shown here. So the maps here are taken from Suffolk HER around the Stowmarket area. And the map on the left shows registered parks and gardens highlighted, and there are 4 in this area. It looks very small on my screen, but in Stowmarket itself, it's Abbots Hall, and then there's Shrubland Hall, Helmingham Hall, and Crows Hall. But if you turn on the monuments layer, as shown in the right-hand map of the same area, you can see that there are lots more records for other kinds of sites, many of which will be archaeological sites or buildings, monuments. And you can start to see a few non-designated landscapes as well, so non-registered landscapes shown by some of the shaded areas, such as Great Finborough Hall Park and Great Park Badley, which is in the circle. And it's interesting to note that when you click on these sites for further details, it shows that they've been identified from map evidence only, in this case from Hodgkinson's 1783 county map, and that no other information about them is currently available on the HER, so it's a bit scant. A couple of weeks ago, I asked HE officers via the HER email forum, which is a brilliant group that I can recommend to you all, how well they thought that undesignated design landscapes were represented in their HERs. So 24 HE officers replied, which was really good of them. And of these, 95% said that they did include non-designated landscapes in their HER, which is great. But unfortunately, only 43% thought that they had good coverage of these. So the officers who thought they had good coverage usually had something like 300 to 400 non-designated landscapes recorded on their HER per district. 17% said that they'd like more records of non-designated landscapes. And 22% said that many of their existing records were outlines only, such as those we just looked at on the previous slide, and needed a lot more detail. A lot of landscapes have been identified from historic OS mapping only, like this 1924 6-inch map of Springfield in Essex, which shows Springfield Place and Springfield Lions. It was really lovely to note that 48% of HER officers said that they used their local County Gardens Trust research as source material, and several of them it's clear that HERs do a very good job of representing registered and non-designated landscapes, but that many records lack detailed content and many non-designated sites are missing. So HERs always welcome more information and will be very pleased to hear from County Gardens Trusts or other researchers. The reports from the Green Futures Project will go into the HER's Grey Literature Library, a collection of unpublished reports managed by the Archaeology Data Service, which the public can view directly or request to view. And then a record and the HER map will be created for each site, either as a dot or if sufficient information about boundary is known, as a polygon. The site summary and description that you'll include in your report are really important, as these will be the main information available on the HER when people are searching the database. You'll see that they can be found on page 1 of our report, and if you'd like to see the report template, you can find it on our resource hub under Green Futures. So they're included on page 1 of our reports, but you will be writing them right at the end, bringing together everything you know about the landscape in a summary. As I've said, wherever possible, we'd like the volunteers or lead volunteer to upload the reports to the HER themselves. This involves making contact with the local HER officer, and you can find all of their contact information on the Heritage Gateway. Now, it may be that your local County Gardens Trust has already established a good relationship with their HER officer, so please do check with your lead volunteer for this project whether this contact already exists. Then it's a simple case of emailing them your report. HERs do usually have quite a big backlog of research waiting to be checked and uploaded, so don't expect your work to appear on the HER immediately. Our Green Futures research recording form was created with input from an HER officer, so it should be quite straightforward to turn into an HER record. HERs do vary, and some may have slightly different requirements. It would be best, therefore, if you could contact your HER officer as soon as possible to let them know that your reports will be arriving after April and check if they have any specific requirements for submitting them. So whilst getting non-designated heritage assets onto the HER helps to protect them in the planning system, local listing further raises their profile and also brings the benefit of national and local planning policy. These lists, held by local authorities, identify heritage assets which are valued by the local community as distinctive elements of the local historic environment, making a positive contribution to the local character and sense of place because of their heritage value. Whilst local listing provides no additional planning controls, the fact that a building or site is on a local list means that its conservation as a heritage asset is an objective of the NPPF and a material consideration when determining the outcome of a planning application. NPPF paragraph 197 says that the effect of an application on the significance of a non-designated heritage asset should be taken into account in determining the application, and a balanced judgment will be required having regard to the scale of harm or loss. Many local planning authorities adopt the local list as part of their local plan, meaning that those sites are given further protection by local policy. But local lists don't have to be included in local plans, and they're useful documents even if they stand alone. And you can have a look at another of Historic England's advice notes, shown here, for more information. Now, according to the NPPF, planning authorities must include parks and gardens in local plans as part of what they call a positive strategy for the conservation and enjoyment of the historic environment, which is absolutely great. But unfortunately, in reality, funding and capacity problems mean that only around half of local planning authorities currently have local lists of heritage assets. And disappointingly, the majority of these comprise buildings and structures only, so a thorough inclusion of historic design landscapes is pretty rare. North Norfolk District Council, for example, currently only has a list of locally listed buildings with no landscapes included. In Cambridgeshire local list, there are only 4 historic parks and gardens, 3 burial grounds and a war memorial, and they're all in East Cambridgeshire. So you can see that this local list is crying out for designed landscape nominations. A better example in the East region is East Suffolk Council, which has a local list of parks and gardens of historic and landscape interest, shown here. And it currently lists 17 landscapes, which isn't bad. Given the area, these are mostly large gardens and parkland of estates like Redisham Hall and Benacre Park, shown here. The list drew on summaries of significance and character informed by research by the University of East Anglia and Suffolk Gardens Trust. You can generally view your local list online, and members of the public are encouraged to nominate heritage assets for inclusion, as this increases community involvement in managing the historic environment. So it would be very worthwhile for landscape researchers in the County Gardens Trusts or elsewhere to make contact and offer up the landscapes they've researched. If this information is already on the HER, then it's even easier for the local planning authority to extract it for inclusion in the list. Many county gardens trusts already make major contributions to local lists, including Kent, Yorkshire, Cheshire, Essex, Devon, Herts, Buckinghamshire, Sussex, and lots more. Kent, for example, has worked with Kent County Council since the early 1990s to produce a compendium of research reports which comply with Historic England's local listing guidance. And this has been of considerable benefit to the various planning departments in Kent in enabling them to identify sites which need to be protected. And here you can see a couple of examples of reports produced by County Gardens Trusts, and you can find many more on County Gardens Trust's websites. You can talk to your local authority to ask whether they have a local list or not. You could approach either your conservation officer or strategic planning officers who are responsible for producing local plans. And if there is no local list in your area and you have the time and energy, you may be able to help to get one started. You could try approaching your local councillors to see whether they would support officers getting involved in local listing in the light of government guidance that all local planning authorities should have a local list. And you might find that linking up with other amenity societies with an interest in the historic environment, such as a building preservation trust, makes a stronger case for developing a list. Your local authority will have criteria for adding to the local list to ensure that only assets of real local significance are included. So do be prepared for not all sites to be accepted. It will take a little time for local authorities to assess and hopefully approve your nomination, after which it will be published on their website. We'll now move on to Historic England's National Heritage List for England, which includes over 400,000 listed, registered or scheduled sites, including parks and gardens, battlefields, shipwrecks and buildings of all shapes and sizes. Historic England's Missing Pieces project, which was formerly known as Enriching the List, was launched in 2016, so that anybody could add their own images and stories to entries on the list, helping to build their historic record and helping councils and managers to understand how these sites are special to the people who visit them and how to better protect their significances. So you can add information about what you love about a building or site, the memories it holds for you, what it means to the community, and you can add photos or share other additional information. Of the 1,700 plus registered parks and gardens on the list, around 1,400 already have a Missing Pieces contribution, so that's pretty good. Now, landscapes that aren't registered won't be included in the National Heritage List, but the listed building or contains listed garden structures, you can add some of your research and images of the landscape to these records. It's also a great way to promote your County Gardens Trust or other research group if you register on behalf of your group rather than as an individual. So to contribute to the project, go to the Missing Pieces homepage and join by giving them your name or the name of your organisation, email address, and then creating a password. And after your account setup is confirmed, you can add a logo or picture. And there's room for a description too, which is all useful if you want people to find out more about you or your organisation. If you know the exact name of your park or garden, listed building or scheduled site that you want to add information to, you can use the Search the List button here. Alternatively, use Explore the Map button and zoom into the area you're interested in. And then you can select your site or building and the listing details come up. The right-hand image shows an example from Suffolk. If you click the middle button, you'd see the full listing for the site. And to see all the current Missing Pieces project contributions, you'd click on the Comments and Photos button here. When you're logged into the Missing Pieces project, a box will come up at this point for you to add new material. And you can write your text in the box, remembering to add references to where the information comes from, and also any image details or any information about the photographer or information like that. You can add up to 4 photographs and include links to websites, YouTube videos, etc. Try to avoid duplicating any information that's already been added to missing pieces. So don't add the same historic postcard as somebody else has also put on, for example. Your research could well contradict somebody else's contribution, in which case it's really important to quote where you found your information. And once you're entirely happy with your text, photos, and descriptions, press submit and you'll get a message telling you that your contribution is awaiting review by Historic England, which can take up to 2 days. We really do recommend having a go at enhancing list entries in this way. And you can let us know in the comments perhaps if you've tried this already and how you found the process. Here on the right is an example from our recent Suffolk's Unforgettable Gardens project with text and historic and modern images giving information on the dripping well at Cliff Gardens in Felixstowe. Now, we're really grateful to Jana, who's one of the Gardens Trust student volunteers, for having created a short video on Instagram explaining the whole process of adding information to the Missing Pieces project. And do definitely have a look. It'll take you about a minute to view this, and you can see how easy it is to do so. The link will be in the PDF of the presentation. As we've said in our earlier webinars, the NSIPs that we selected in the east of England for the Green Futures project were all at pre-application stage when we chose them. And this was to enable volunteers to submit research about design landscapes potentially affected by them in plenty of time, so that this new knowledge could be used by statutory consultees like Historic England and the Gardens Trust. As you may be aware, however, one of the aims of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which was introduced to Parliament in March this year, is to fast-track planning decisions on major infrastructure projects to support the government's target of clean power by 2030. And the plan is to streamline NSIP consultation and consent process, mainly by simplifying and shortening the pre-application stage here, from around 2 years to 1 year. So this does affect our project timetable for some of the NSIPs we're looking at. For example, the Norwich to Tilbury pre-application stage has just been accepted for examination by the Planning Inspectorate, earlier than originally planned, and the examination phase will begin in the coming months. The examination phase takes up to 6 months, meaning that the Green Futures volunteers' research will still be able to feed into the examination phase, but not into the pre-app phase. But don't worry, because new information can, however, be submitted right up to the end of the examination period, so this is not really an issue for the project. We do, however, urge volunteers to have their research finished by the end of April, if at all possible, so that they can submit it promptly and get it to the consultees. As I've mentioned, getting research onto the HER and local lists can take time, so we'll also be finding out if there are any other ways that we can share your reports more quickly with consultees and with NSIP developers. So those were the main databases which we can usefully contribute our research to without too much difficulty. And you may well have experience of others, and we'd love to hear about those if you want to add some comments. To sum up then, by researching and by making this information accessible, historic parks and gardens have a much better chance of being protected in the planning process, whether that's in relation to an NSIP application dealt with by the Planning Inspectorate or one considered by local planning authorities. Research by volunteers, whether that's just a few photos and comments on the Missing Pieces project or a huge report submitted to the HER, will contribute to the protection of historic parks and gardens at all levels. Registration is the highest level of protection, but not the only way in which historic parks and gardens can be recognised. Non-designated heritage assets must be considered when assessing planning applications and making policy decisions. So your research really does have great value, and please do share it. So the next steps for the project. As I said, it would be really useful if you could let Frankie or me know if you or your County Gardens Trust already has contact and perhaps already contributes to your local HER or your local heritage list. And if not, please could you try and make contact with these people as soon as possible, preferably via your lead volunteer for Green Futures in your county. And do let us know if you need any support with this. So I'd just like to say congratulations. This was the last webinar for Green Futures and you have completed the training. There's still lots to do in the project though, as you know. So coming up next, from November to March, volunteers will be researching and recording their own sites. And as they do this, they can have support from information that's on the resource hub under the Green Futures, in the Green Futures folder. Group archives visits to teach you how to use the archives and look for materials. Now, several of these have taken place already. And the next one will be to Hertfordshire Archives on the 20th of November. If you haven't been on an archive visit yet, but would like to learn how to use your County Record Office, please do get in touch with your lead volunteer. We will be having online meetings, so online meetings with Frankie and me, and also with in your own counties. So please do stay in touch with us and with each other, and let us know how you're getting on and if you have any issues at all. We'd encourage you to meet up as much as possible with other local volunteers, and if you'd like to do this, do let us know because we can fund your travel and some refreshments. So please let us know if you want to do this and when you'd like to do that. And then very excitingly, we're going to be having a whole project meetup at the beautiful Madingley Hall in Cambridgeshire on Saturday, the 14th of February. So very romantic Valentine's Day. And this is going to be a chance to share your progress and troubleshoot any problems, as well as having a lovely lunch and a guided tour of the landscape with Dr. Twiggs Way. So this is going to be a really nice day. A lot of you said how you appreciated meeting up at the Food Museum in Stowmarket. And we do recognise the value of all the volunteers being able to meet up with one another and share their issues and share their progress. So that will be available to sign up to very soon. So please do come if you can. And again, we'll be able to help you with your travel expenses if needs be. A lot of you have joined our project WhatsApp group, which you're using to share information. And please do let Frankie or me know if you'd like to join that. So then from April to September, the volunteers are going to be sharing their finished research via the online databases, which we've just gone through, and also via the Gardeners Trust website via our brand new Garden History Hub. Then there'll be a final webinar presenting the project's exciting findings. We also hope to create some leaflets about some of the sites and about the project in general. And there'll be a travelling pop-up exhibition running probably from July to September, which will be going around libraries in the East region. And this will include an exhibition launch event, which you'll all be invited to. And then the whole project will finish in October with a lovely project celebration, at which we'd like to say a huge thank you to all the volunteers who've taken place. The venue for this is yet to be decided, but we hope that this could be one of the landscapes that's researched as part of the project. So Frankie and I would just like to say thank you so much for following these webinars. And we hope that you're now looking forward very much to being let loose on your own landscapes. And we can't wait to hear about all of your discoveries. So thanks for coming today. We're going to take questions now, followed by a quick poll about how you found today's webinar and the rest of the training. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Tamsin. Just as I launch the poll, we've got one question in from Ian, but if there are any more questions, do just add them to the chat or ask now. And Ian asks, what do we do when the HER officer does not respond to inquiries or requests to see things?
That's tricky. Worth contacting the conservation officer or somebody else in the local planning authority and saying that you're having this issue. There are other ways of getting research onto the HER. So you may have heard of a database called Oasis, to which anybody can submit research, and then Oasis is a sort of centralised national database, and it then sends the research off to the appropriate county HER, who then have to accept it. Well, they don't have to, then can choose to accept it for uploading to the HER, but it's a rather slower process than getting it directly to the HER. what I think I would say is that for this project, if any of the volunteers are having issues at all, please get in touch with Frankie or me, and we'll do our best to contact the HER officers and get that sorted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
No problem. If it helps at all when you do get in touch with HER officers and you want to copy me or Tamsin into those emails, please do, and name drop the project as well. And that is funded by Historic England. Do everything you can to try and get their attention. That might help. Fingers crossed.
Thank you too.
I think that's it for questions. But yeah, if anyone else has got any other questions, do ask us now, or feel free to email us at any point. Don't forget about our WhatsApp group too. You can ask questions at any point on there as well. But if you finished the feedback form that we've just put on your screen, I think that'll be it from us.
Thank you very much for coming. I know it's a lot of sort of information to bombard you with, and it's not the most exciting of topics, but it just is so important to not just do and enjoy your research, but then to share it. It just gives it so much more value.